What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Rotoworld basketball show presented by NBC. I'm Dan Titus, joined with Noah Rubin and Raphielle Johnson. It's week 13. We're going to cover the latest news, a must-add rookie, and have some pretty interesting player debates. But I want to kick things off with January 22nd being the anniversary of Kobe dropping 81. Dude had the top 10, I think a top 10 fantasy performance of all time. Yeah, I don't know where you guys were at that time, but Raph, what were you doing when Kobe dropped 81?
I was watching it. It was kind of surprising that Toronto didn't seem to do more to run like more people at him. He probably was going to shoot the ball anyway, but it's like, I don't know. You guys can probably do a little bit more here, but it was an amazing thing to watch. Obviously, none of us were alive for Wilt scoring 100. So for someone to go for 81 in an NBA game is pretty crazy.
Dan, I was 5. I
knew. I
was like, when you asked that question, I'm like, I need to look up what year specifically so I can tell exactly how old I was.
But 5. You probably have seen the highlights by now.
I've seen the highlights. What I was doing at the time, probably playing with toys. I don't know. Toys.
But yeah, Kobe, man, it was if anyone has the chance and they're bored and they want to go watch that, it's a clinic of scoring on all 3 levels, and Kobe was just a nutcase at that point. I think he averaged 43 points per game during the month of January when he did that. So dude was just a beast. But anyway, before we hopped on though, we received some pretty interesting news from the Dallas Mavericks. Looks like Dereck Lively is going to be out for 2 to 3 months with a small fracture in his foot. Daniel Gafford coming off of 31-point career night. Raph, how do you kind of see the Dallas Mavericks squad now? Like, what's the fantasy fallout of Dereck Lively potentially being out for the next 3 months?
Well, it should be just Daniel Gafford. He played well over 30 minutes the other day, when he was rolling in Charlotte. You would hope that's going to be the case, but as we've seen in the past, it doesn't take much for them to give Maxi Kleber 20 to 22 minutes per game. And that really doesn't do anyone any favors. You also have Dwight Powell in there. But this should be a Daniel Gafford situation. I'm sure he's available in some shallow leagues, so you're going to want to pick him up there. But otherwise, if you have him, I think you're in a great spot to go on a run here these next couple months.
Yeah, I was going to say they tend to like giving Maxi Kleber more minutes than we want them to give him. Think they like, he's a different kind of big from Gafford and Lively, which kind of mixes things up. Maybe it's a little bit matchup dependent there. But yeah, it's all Daniel Gafford.
Yeah, Gafford averaging 16 points, 7 boards, three stocks per game without Lively on the floor this year. So he's definitely going to cook. Someone that's also been cooking, Russell Westbrook. Denver continues to just win games. Russ looks even more comfortable. And it seems like Aaron Gordon's kind of fell into this bench role. He's still under a minutes restriction. He's been vocal about, being okay with playing 20 minutes off the bench if it keeps him healthy. Noah, is this something that you feel like Gordon's eventually going to kind of ramp up, or is Russell Westbrook a guy that can be rostered for the foreseeable future here?
I think both are true. I think that eventually Aaron Gordon should make a return to the starting lineup, whether that is this month or sometime over the next 2 months after that. Not entirely sure, but they can slowly ramp him up. They're 17-5 with Russ as a starter, which
you can't bench him.
Right, you can't bench him, but even if they do, the last handful of games, I think he's been playing around 25 minutes per game. Like, he's been starting, but he's not playing 35 minutes. So even if he does move to the bench, I don't see why he can't continue to play 25 minutes and give us really strong value. He's playing well for Denver. It's a lot of fun to see him kind of bounce back after a rough few years.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Talking about this the other day, the first time they brought Aaron back from a calf strain, he was playing starters minutes like 2 games in. Then about 8 more, he re-injures the calf. So they're going to take some time with this. And with Russ playing the way that he has, they can certainly afford to. Christian Brown's also played well. May not have the fantasy impact that Russ does, but he's been another good option. I think the pieces all just seem to fit for Denver right now. So there's no real reason to kind of rush Gordon back into playing starters minutes right now.
Yeah, I got Gordon in a couple of spots, and I'm just going to hold. I think he's still, worthwhile in the minutes that he's playing. Definitely someone you want to keep around in 12-team leagues. Brandon Miller, though, we received news in the beginning of the week that he's going to be out indefinitely with a wrist injury. Nick Smith came out on fire. Trey Manning is still dealing with a back injury, so those guards minutes are definitely available. No, is Nick Smith Jr. someone that you're going to look to add in fantasy?
Definitely. I think I already submitted a waiver claim for him in one of my leagues. Not only has he played well, he had a start with
Is that one?
points.
Just curious.
Wait, what?
Are we talking industry pickup here? Because I might have a bid in myself. I don't know.
Oh, I don't think it was industry pickup.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, I was like,
just making sure.
No,
I'm like,
I think it's a different league. Well, maybe you need to increase your bid. I think.
I'm about to say, I might have to run it up now.
I don't even remember what league it was. Okay. Anyways,
yeah,
played well the last two. You guys both started smiling. I was like, did I say something wrong? But anyways, scoring well, hitting threes, rebounds, some steals, like kind of fitting that role pretty well, playing a lot of minutes, and they have an incredibly favorable schedule the next few weeks. They still have 3 more games this week, and then 4 games, and then 4 games. So yeah, I think like he's probably the best streaming option in Charlotte right now, and they have it in like a really good schedule for streaming, so it works out.
Yeah, I'm not really sure who else they would play there. Like, I guess Seth Curry, but you kind of know what you have there in terms of his value to that rotation. So I don't see that happening. And like Brandon Miller, Nick Smith was a first-round pick last year. So this is as good a time as any to see what they have there in terms of their rebuild. They've won 3 straight, but let's not fool ourselves about them getting into contention for like a play-in spot. I think they're a ways off from that, even in the East. So Nick Smith, I think he's going to get mid to high 20s in minutes, minimum. If he can do that, I think he certainly can provide value, points, 3-pointers, maybe a few assists as well.
Yeah, I think Nick Smith's definitely looking like a pickup. Unless Trey Mann were to return, but doesn't look like he is. So yeah, I agree, Raph. Like Seth Curry's not going to really compete for the minutes, and with that Hornets schedule, Noah, like I think Nick Smith Jr. definitely has some viability over the next couple weeks here. Also found out that Donte DiVincenzo is going to be out indefinitely with a foot injury. Robert Dillingham had a pretty good showing on the MLK slate. I mean, that dude is just a walking bucket. He's so small. Like, I'm like, how is this? Can this last like for a while? But like, I don't know. Like by the way that Mike Conley's playing, like he's not playing to a level that Dillingham can't eat into those minutes. So Raph, is that someone that's on your watch list or someone that you think might be coming fantasy relevant soon?
I think he's more of a watch list guy right now because even with the improved play, still at about 18 minutes. And I'm not sure if that's going to be enough, especially when you have Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards in that rotation as well. So he's most likely going to be on the floor with at least one of those guys. So it's not like his usage is going to skyrocket here. So I think he's more of a watch list guy. If there comes a point where he's playing as many, if not more minutes than Mike Conley, then I would make a move. But for now, he's more of a watch list guy for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's played well, but until Chris Finch has him either starting or, like Raph said, when we were talking about this yesterday in the Q&A, if he can get to like a 6-man role where he's playing 20 to 25 minutes and they're kind of staggering him with Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle to the point where he can have the ball in his hands enough to make an impact, then he might have some value, but it's kind of hard to justify a roster spot right now.
Yeah, I mean, do you see any additional fallout from that, Noah? Like, I mean, obviously more Ant on ball and probably Julius Randle too, but anybody else you see kind of benefiting outside of those 2 guys?
Yeah, I think both of those guys will have the ball more. I think the other, if we're trying to find another name, like Jade McDaniels did play pretty well in that first game back, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to find a lot of streaming value when Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle are taking turns with the ball in their hands.
How about you?
It's pretty much Jaden, but you're not expecting it as much offensively. Thinking more rebounds and defensive stats. Like that's what I took away from the Memphis game. 2 steals, 2 blocks, and I think 12 rebounds. Those are the areas where you're kind of looking for value with Jaden at this point, because even with Donte out, it's not like he's suddenly going to get 4 or 5 more shots per game. Like those shots are most likely to be taken by Edwards or Randle. So,
yeah, I'd agree with that. Frustratingly, it's already January, and we're already seeing teams tank. The Jazz, I mean, they continue to just move Lauri Markkanen in and out of the lineup. John Collins is surprisingly active. I mean, we can just continue. I think, especially we'll talk about the trade coming up, and also a rookie that I think might be having a really nice, sizable opportunity coming up. But actually, 2 rookies. But Yeah, I mean, what can fantasy managers do? I mean, I guess you guys all play in leagues. How do you kind of manage these teams that are just starting to rest players? And like, are you starting to already look ahead to like the future of like, all right, given the position to where some teams are right now, already giving it up, should we already be invested in players that might be playing longer down the stretch? To you, Raph, like, what do you think? Like, what's your?
I think if anything, you're targeting younger players because you kind of feel like those are the ones who are going to have the opportunities to play through mistakes, play heavy minutes, because in some instances, some of these veterans are almost being preserved for the trade deadline. Like if they're going to be moved, like you do enough to kind of showcase them and you hope it goes well, but then you kind of pull it back a little bit to make sure they're healthy as well. So I think for teams like Utah, Brooklyn, you're targeting younger players at this point because they're the ones who seem pretty secure in terms of minutes.
Definitely, and they'll be able to play through a lot of their mistakes, which there will be plenty of those. But a lot, like some of these tanking teams have a lot of veterans that will hold value that should be moved at the trade deadline. But it is a little bit concerning that, for example, like Utah and Portland have been pretty hesitant to move some of these guys. Like they take a little bit longer than they should, or they just haven't traded them at all. Like Jordan Clarkson's still there, John Collins is still there, Colin Sexton's still there in Utah. So there's a lot of guys that could be moved at the deadline, but like, will it happen? Portland should be trading probably like Simons, DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, Jeremy Grant. These guys that could, these guys that could have some value for other teams that would open minutes up. But I guess on the flip side of that is if some of those veterans are moved to contending teams and all of a sudden they're healthier and playing more games and impacting winning. So you could look at it as a buy low opportunity potentially. I mean, you're kind of taking a risk. Like, are these guys going to get traded or not? But it could end up paying off if you're able to get them at a pretty low price just because they're starting to miss time already.
Yeah, I think that the trade buyout season is going to be really interesting now. And I think things that will kind of set that off, the Suns made a move earlier today. Was it today or late last night? The Suns consolidated. The Suns traded for 3 picks, traded 1 pick for 3 picks, but the significance of that 2031 unprotected when your team is the second oldest team in the league. It's a pretty nice little bet by Danny Ainge there. But I think that also opens up the door for the Suns to potentially trade for Jimmy Butler or another player. Rumors were circulating today that maybe Bradley Beal would waive his clause for the Milwaukee Bucks. So that's one other team that could get involved. I don't know, man. This is going to be I think it's going to be more interesting than not this weekend. I think something's going to get done. Noah, where do you stand with like the Suns making that trade and what could potentially be on the table for big name players moving to other places?
I would assume, or I mean, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're making that trade and they've already had conversations with other teams that would rather have the 3 potentially very, very late firsts than the singular unprotected first in 2031. And maybe that helps facilitate a trade for Jimmy Butler. I mean, it's probably gonna be a 3 or 4 team trade with a lot of moving pieces. So it's kind of hard to predict exactly what that looks like. But it was just kind of interesting to me because I thought it was a great move for the Jazz to be able to get an unprotected pick, like you mentioned, second oldest team in the league. And the way that they've made moves the last few years, I mean, it's aggressive, but it's not exactly some of like the smartest moves. So it could absolutely be a dumpster fire within a few seasons. And that 2031 pick is like a top 5 pick, like very, very realistic when the 3 picks they moved are probably going to be in the late 20s because it's like the least favorable between 3 very good teams from I think 2 of those and then least favorable between 2 teams for the 2025 one. So I'm assuming those conversations have been had. That's what teams prefer over the 2031 first, but it was interesting. I'm assuming that, like you said, this is the first move, like a first domino to fall. But then there's other reports that Jimmy Butler probably won't be able to find a deal until this summer, probably won't be able to make it happen by the deadline. So we'll see. But yeah, first domino to fall. I just don't know exactly what's going to come from it.
Yeah, there's shout out to whatever 6th or 7th grader is enjoying an Uncrustable right now. Who's probably going to be that lottery pick in 2031.
I think it's an elementary schooler.
Oh, yeah, possible. We're a long ways off, but yeah, I think Phoenix needed some sort of draft capital because they gave up so much in the Durant and Beal trades. Having 1 pick for 2031 wasn't going to move the needle, especially when you're going to have to move a hefty salary in order to bring in a star in return. So I don't know. It's quite clear that Jimmy's doing the whole passive aggressive thing, like the sneaker colorways, and barely above minimum effort when on the court while in Miami. So they're probably going to have to make a move before the deadline instead of playing this thing out, because they're kind of walking on thin ice here. Things haven't gone completely to where, but I'd imagine if he's still on that roster by February 7th, there's probably going to be a serious problem down there. But in terms of Phoenix, where's Beal going to want to go in terms of that trade clause? And that just lives in infamy as one of the worst contracts in NBA history, because it seriously, between the availability, between the no trade clause and his availability over the years, man, good on the Wizards to get off of that contract, but wow.
And for him to actually have a no trade clause is wild. But so I was thinking about it when I saw that he had interest in the Bucks, because he's not having a bad season. He's shooting 48% from the field. He's scoring 17 a game, but he's doing his normal 17, 4 and 4. The splits are nice. So I feel like in a new scenario, if he's actually playing motivated, this could be an interesting buy low window for Bradley Beal. I just don't know that. I don't know. What are you going to really try? I don't know. He's not going to give you much more. Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I feel like, the Miami Heat, they also having some incentive to win. They don't want to lose that pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder unprotected next year. So this is going to be an interesting multi-team trade, as Noah kind of alluded to. Hopefully it gets done this weekend. There's going to definitely be some big names. And speaking of big names, watch the biggest names in sports talk, including Mike Florio, Dan Patrick, Dan Lebitard, and Matthew Berry, as they cover the biggest moments on and off the field each weekday on the NBC Sports Now channel. It's now available on Peacock and free on most streaming platforms. Learn more at NBCsports.com/now. So I alluded to it a little bit earlier that there's some must-add rookies. I'd completely forgotten about Isaiah Collier. I don't know if he's a must-add, but Kel'el Ware, my God, this man has been unleashed. Finally, Spo has talked about, the coming, how you can't just throw the rookie out there. I think now is the perfect time, because he looks really good at playing alongside Bam Adebayo, putting up monster numbers. Noah, is this someone that now you think is a must-add in 10 and 12-team leagues?
Yes. I don't think that he should be on the waiver wire in pretty much any league. Maybe if you're running your 6-team league that rosters 8 people, sure, he's not going to be rostered. But I think that what he's shown over the last few games, both in the games that he played limited minutes and was still able to be somewhat productive, and the games that he's played 30-plus minutes and has had, a couple double-doubles, some big 20-point games, multiple blocks per game. I think the fact that they're willing to start him alongside Bam, that's something that shouldn't change. I don't think Haywood Highsmith is going to come back and just demand the minutes to the point where they move Ware, the guy they just drafted in the first round, back to the bench. He should be locked in as a starter for the rest of the season, barring some ridiculous trade. But even if that happens, I don't really see Ware being the one pushed out of the lineup. So we like what we've seen. His role should be safe, must roster player.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the one question was the spacing offensively between him and Bam, because when you've got those two and Jimmy out there, there's limited 3-point shooting. That puts even more on Duncan Robinson. And when he's healthy, Tyler Hero didn't play last night, the groin issue. But I think Ware's in a position where he's going to play plenty of minutes here. They needed a jolt, some sort of jolt of energy, and also the production as well. So I think he's in a really good spot, and he should be rostered wherever available.
Yeah, he just does way too much for fantasy not to be rostered. We've seen the high volume in rebounds already, scoring. Obviously, he can shoot. He's going to be a really good fantasy player if he continues to see this kind of action. So I'm really excited about him. But also in Utah, it's hard to get excited about anybody in Utah because you don't know when they're going to play or not. Colin Sexton had his nice little run with Keontae George out, enough to probably showcase, hey, teams, come get me. But Isaiah Collier, obviously rookie this year. Is he? I'm tripping.
Yeah, first round pick.
Rookie. Okay, yeah, I thought so. He's getting some time to play, and Jordan Clarkson definitely not coming back for a little while. Keontae George in and out of the lineup. Is this someone, Raph, that you're like, all right, I can get behind it, even though inefficient, probably going to be, pretty inefficient, but we saw some upside with his double, 20 and 10 on Monday night.
Yeah, the shooting isn't going to be there, but the playmaking is. Double digits in assists in 3 straight games. And I think he's in a situation where even if he comes off the bench when George and Sexton are available, he's going to play plenty. Because in the case of Sexton, they know what they have there. And it's about probably getting him enough minutes where he can continue to showcase himself ahead of the trade deadline. And in terms of Keontae, I think he's in a similar boat to Collier, and they're trying to evaluate who can be the point guard that leads our franchise in the future. Keontae can certainly score, but he's been inefficient in that area, and the playmaking hasn't been up to what Collier's done either. So I think between the playmaking and the defense, Collier is certainly someone that I am looking to have rostered in my leagues right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Utah over the last few years, while they've been tanking, it's had a bunch of small shooting guards. Like, none of them are true point guards between Clarkson, Sexton, and Keontae George. They've tried to see if Keontae George can make that work, but I think it's not quite as much of the natural fit as Collier. Collier's still working through the scoring, but he's shown some flashes here and there. It's going to be inefficient. He's a rookie point guard, no big deal, but double-digit assists in 3 straight games, you can't find that on the waiver wire. So I think, like, you don't find that often. I mean, you can because he's there, but he's the only option.
Yeah, I was trying to check to see if Collier has a lower turnover rate than Keontae George. I'm pretty sure he does. Because Keontae George turns over the ball entirely too much for 9 leagues. I had to drop him, and I don't regret it. But yeah, I think it's definitely going to be an audition for Collier to see if he can run, and clearly he's getting those double-digit assists. You can't find that on waivers, as Noah stated. So I think that's definitely someone you can consider. Another player that's been on a crazy hot run lately has been second-year, call him pseudo-star, Scoot Henderson. And I think that the profile that Raph was kind of describing is like a guy that has the upside of a 20 and 10 type of dude. I mean, Scoot Henderson's shown that more than a few times, but it's been a roller coaster for him. But Raph, do you think that this is a moment where where you think he sticks? And obviously, whatever Blazers moves that they make at the deadline will probably help Scoot. But do you like what you're seeing from him and someone that you can actually keep in roster for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I do. He's been close to a top 75 player over the last 2 weeks. Simons has missed some time, but there have also been games when he still played really good minutes off the bench, surpassing 30 points, So 30 minutes, I should say. So Scoot's going to have the minutes. I think we were talking about this yesterday. It's like we've seen this before with Portland having a smallish backcourt that really wasn't defensively inclined when you think back to Dame and CJ. And they eventually had to pull the plug on that. I don't know if they'd want to get that far down the road with this duo as well. So maybe that's something to keep an eye on, if not for the trade deadline, but for the offseason, especially if Scoot can finish off the season strong, see what they're going to do there. But yeah, he's definitely he's another player that should be rostered because I think he's going to be shut down safe once we hit that point in the calendar.
Yeah, definitely. He's been incredible. I saw this tweet. It was from 2 days ago. It's from David McKay comparing Scoot Henderson at 20 years old to Russell Westbrook at 20 years old. And the per 36 numbers are incredibly similar. And that's a guy that Scoot has been compared to a lot. So it's encouraging. It's not saying he's going to be an MVP that averages a triple-double for like 3 seasons in a row, but it's encouraging that he can get off to a slow start to his career like Russ and a lot of other point guards did. And he still could end up being really good. This last stretch has been very, very encouraging. He was a little quieter night last night with Anthony Simons back. Just didn't shoot as much, but he still played well. Definitely a guy that I'd be looking to roster for the rest of the season. Hopefully this is a breakout that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think it's definitely on his side that he's got some veterans that will probably be offloaded. And, it seems like Chauncey Billups is putting him into better positions to be successful. So I don't know. Hopefully Scoot turns the corner here. I don't have him in enough leagues, but definitely think he has some staying power. Love him in points leagues though too. We talked about, Nick Smith Jr. being a top pickup this week. Obviously, Kel'el Ware must add. Is there anybody else, Noah, that you've kind of been monitoring, or someone that you're gonna stream later this week or going into next?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of teams that play 3 games that could have, could benefit just from that, like 3 games over the next 4 or 5 days just to close out the week. So one guy, just to throw another Hawk out there, because we haven't talked about the Hawks yet, and I just can't allow that. I can't.
Saw Zach Richache out there, and I was like, no, we're just going to skip over that. Let's see how long we go without mentioning a Hawk.
See if you can make me bring it up instead of bringing it up naturally for me. Thanks, Dan. Vit Krejci has been starting in place of Richache and has been a top 100 guy. Richache is going to miss a few more games, and Atlanta plays 3 more games this week, so maybe like a sneaky ad there. There's only 3 games on Friday and 1 game on Sunday, so you could probably find some like schedule benefits there. I think Portland is the only team that plays both Friday and Sunday, so maybe you look at like a Rob Williams, assuming that Scoot isn't on your waiver wire, like a Denny Avdia, just like to maximize your games played in your schedule.
Yeah, I think Portland would be the team I'm targeting, playing both on Friday and Sunday. And then that Friday game is the second game of a back-to-back. So I think if you're looking at Robert Williams, you're kind of hoping that he sits on Thursday and plays on Friday. That would work out best from a streaming standpoint. I think Toumani Camara is the other guy that I would really be looking at. He's been a starter all year. He's been playing quality minutes. Fantasy value hasn't been great recently, just inside the top 150 over the last 2 weeks. But I think his opportunity is such that you certainly want to target him for the remainder of this week.
Yeah, I like that call. It just sucks that he missed last game with rest, but I think he's going to play the final 3 games of this week. So, really excited about him. I'd also throw out Aaron Wiggins in deeper leagues. The Thunder do play 3 games against Utah, Dallas, and Portland. So
Cason Wallace, all those low roster guys.
Cason Wallace too. Right, absolutely. Yeah, Cason Wallace, I think, is another must roster guy that I don't think people are assuming that he is, but like the steals and what he's doing from like threes and just all around numbers, man, he's been really solid. I just love the matchup against the Jazz. Like, I mean, if that has blowout potential, like that's going to be a good thing for the bench guys. Would also throw out the Warriors' schedule is good. They play Sacramento, Chicago, and the Lakers, but it's just hard to trust. But like, just look at the injury report. Like, I think Moses Moody might have some short-term appeal. Kevon Looney potentially. But yeah, that's going to be a deep cut. But yeah, those are the main ones that I think I would probably be targeting. Al Horford's probably going to miss a game because the Celtics play back-to-back on Wednesday, Thursday. We've also gone the whole show without talking about the Sixers.
With that,
Tyrese Maxey looked good, but that's probably about it.
Sorry to interrupt you, but in terms of Boston, would you target Luke Cornett? Because Porzingis, you probably think is probably going to miss a game as well. You hope they stagger it between he and Horford, unlike last week where they both sat out the same game. But that could probably help Cornett if they were to do that again too. So.
Yeah, and Kristaps wasn't initially on this injury report, but now he's questionable with an illness. So we'll see if they stagger, if they both miss tonight's games. They're both questionable.
Yeah, word to the wise, anytime someone gets downgraded to questionable with an illness the day of, they're probably not going to play. I feel like that happened. Who was that? Cole Anthony yesterday, I believe, was the latest one to have that happen to him.
And then Jonathan Isaac played through it and then played 5 minutes and was like, actually, guys, I'm too sick to play. I'm done.
Right. Ben Simmons had one over the weekend too, I think.
So yeah, follow the injury report, man. It doesn't lie to you. All right, let's go to the pitch. We got Man City and Chelsea. Manchester City tries to climb back from the Premier League table this Saturday when they face Chelsea. City beat the Blues at the beginning of the season. Can they do it again this weekend? Find out at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. All right, so Raph, you've been doing a good job of keeping up with your rankings throughout the season. The latest risers, though, that I wanted to bring up, we mentioned Nick Smith Jr. earlier. but I think we'd be remiss not to mention Mark Williams and him actually playing well, looking healthy. It was a frustrating road for him for much of the year and for fantasy managers, but what are you liking from him as well as Miles Bridges for the Hornets right now, especially with Brandon Miller, out indefinitely?
Yeah, combination of the minutes and the production. Williams, obviously, with the injury woes, you're a bit concerned in terms of how much he can take on. He's been playing good minutes, and he's been playing well. So I think both of those guys, for me, it was kind of like a correction on my part to make sure they're a bit higher where they needed to be. So I was a bit more conservative with their rankings in previous weeks. So they both look good to go. Charlotte hasn't declared a tank, and I don't know. I think these guys are young enough. They're probably going to get to play through this stuff. So I think they're in a good spot there. And another riser for me was Onyeka Okongwu. Moving into the starting lineup on Monday, played well before that. But I think the one thing we're waiting to see was that a matchup situation with the Knicks, or is that going to hold? You would hope it holds, especially with Clint Capella being the subject of trade rumors. But I think he's someone else that's going to have really good value the rest of the way here.
Yeah, it looks like I didn't need to force the Hawks talk. It was actually on the plan. So anyways, just needed to make sure. But no, I mean, he wasn't great in that start against the Knicks. I think when we talked about it yesterday, Raph, I kind of attributed it to Trae Young turning it over 9 times because that could have been a few more buckets for Okongwu. Sure. But he had been playing well the last 3 games before that. Kind of excited to see what he does. Their next 3 games are against the Pistons, the Raptors, and the Raptors again. So I'm excited to see what Okongwu can do, assuming that they didn't if Quinn Snyder just was kind of messing with us. It was like, oh, we're going back to Capella. I'm gonna be really upset. So hopefully this was like a permanent move, because if that is, then both him and Mark Williams I think should be phenomenal center options for the rest of the season and beyond that.
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned about Mark Williams if the Charlotte Hornets decide to pull the plug, because then it's like, do you really want to risk injury to this guy after he's always been injured? But yeah, let's talk about some fallers. Like, I think as we were discussing that Suns trade, I think it's also obvious that, Jusuf Nurkic is someone that the Suns want to come off of. Where do you kind of see Nurk in your rankings, and also Bradley Beal, who you're also not a fan of, clearly?
I think Nurkic may be out of the top 200 period eventually, because unless he's probably going to need a trade. They acquired Nick Richards with the idea of him being the starter. He didn't play well against Cleveland on Monday, but foul trouble and also Jared Allen. So I chalked it up to those 2 issues for him. He played well in his debut against the Pistons on Saturday. So that's his job. And you've got Oso Iguodala who's shown some promise. Mason Plumlee's still there too. So you can't play 3 guys in a rotation at the center position. They tried that. They didn't do that on Monday because neither Plumlee nor Iguodala played much. But if those guys aren't playing much, I think they played 12 minutes combined. Nurkic isn't going to play much once he's given a clean bill of health or whatever's going on there. So, yeah, I think it's over for him. And I think Beal, you're just waiting to see what happens on the trade market, because it's quite clear he doesn't like coming off the bench. Hasn't made a big stink about it publicly, but you can, body language and whatnot, body language and production tell of greater truth than anything that someone can say in front of a camera. So he's in a tough spot fantasy-wise too.
Yeah, I think if you're holding out hope for either of them at this point, it's please trade them to a team that wants to start them. It could be Miami or Milwaukee for Beal, or maybe some other surprise team that just wants to play him a lot. And that would be potentially a pretty good scenario, because we saw, he was phenomenal with the Wizards for a very long time when they weren't any good. So I think maybe it's a team like that. I'm not saying it Washington specifically, but some other team that just wants him to go out there and sell tickets because he's fun to watch score, which I don't even know if he has that in him still. And then Nurkic is the same thing. I honestly think maybe the best scenario is that he's traded to some tanking team that wants a veteran presence in there, but he's not impacting their losing. Like, he's still contributing to them losing and helping their lottery odds. So I don't know. I don't think I can justify rostering Nurkic anymore at this point. It's been a little while before that as well. Beal, I'd still rather hold out a little bit of hope for him.
Yeah. Who's going to take on Nurk is the question. Like, what bad team could he go to?
Let's see. Who doesn't have a center? Maybe
New Orleans?
Oh, they have Eve Misi. That's Eve Misi ratio. I won't accept that. But no, maybe as like a floor spacing big. Yeah, come on, Raph. Back me up. We don't allow disrespect.
Misi's in a cold streak, man. I'm hoping he can. I'm still holding on to him though. I'm still holding.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think he's going to be a starter anywhere. I kind of wonder if that ship has left the port just because of the defensive inefficiencies. Like, they're just going to pick and roll that man to death, and he's not really able to do anything at this stage in his career. So,
nothing.
Yeah.
It's crazy that he once started ahead of Nikola Jokic. Like, crazy.
And he put it that way.
Let's talk about some rest of season values real quick. Noah, who would you rather have? Noah, Donovan Mitchell or Anthony Edwards?
I don't know. I want to I'll throw my name out there as well. You guys can decide between us three. But no, I'd rather have Anthony Edwards. Donovan Mitchell has been a guy I've been much higher on in fantasy over the last couple of years than Anthony Edwards, specifically because his 9 cap value ends up looking a little prettier. It's more of a well-rounded game, but they've been incredibly good this year, obviously. But his production has dropped off quite a bit from last year, which was the best statistical season of his career. Whereas Anthony Edwards has been, arguably having the best statistical season of his career, and it's pretty comparable in terms of 9 cap value. Donovan Mitchell is still ahead by a little bit. But at what point does the team that has either 6 or 7 losses just continue to rest their stars from time to time? Like, let's make sure that we're fully healthy for the playoffs, which are in about 2.5 months. So yeah, we have a back-to-back. Why would we play Donovan Mitchell both games? Let's just give him we're playing 3 games in 5 days. Like, let's just give him off one. We have a little bit of wiggle room to keep the top seed. So Anthony Edwards, they're in a grind to make the postseason at all. So he's going to shoot the ball a lot. I mean, now that DiVincenzo's out, we talked about he's probably going to shoot the ball even more, maybe see a bump in assists as well. So I think I'd rather have Anthony Edwards the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Cleveland's overall rotation is better, so they don't need to rely on Mitchell as much as Minnesota does Edwards. So, yeah, I would take Edwards for that reason. And it's going to take a combination of Cleveland borderline collapsing and somebody beneath him getting hot, even beyond the Celtics or Knicks, for them to not be a top 3 seed in the East. So they're going to have the ability to rest some of those guys, even if it's just play them 25 minutes in a game instead of 35. And, so I would definitely prefer Anthony Edwards in this scenario.
Yeah, clean sweep for me, Anthony Edwards. I mean, I think the other aspect, Cleveland's record, maybe they get to 70 wins, maybe they don't. I could see it if they didn't, maybe they, kind of pull the plug a little bit early, get some rest for Donovan going into the playoffs. But yeah, I think it's much for what you guys said. Donovan's the more efficient player, but if we're talking counting stats, and especially the fact that Anthony Edwards leads the league in 3-pointers made, he's kind of caught up to Donovan Mitchell offensively. So yeah, I'll take Ant-Man's counting stats all day, and they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot, no doubt, because they are terrible. I should say inconsistent. Is the next guy. So I feel like this one's probably easier for me. I'm going to take Alperen Sengun, but what are your guys, Raph, what's your thought on Alperen Sengun and Paul George?
Sengun all day.
Yeah.
I'm not. I think what he does for that offense is not that Paul isn't a key figure in Philadelphia. He certainly is, but Sengun, the availability is going to be there. No,
you're not using him like it.
I'm saying you get that kind of contract, you're going to have to be a key guy. So whether or not he plays up to it, now that's on him.
There we go.
I think Sengun for sure is the guy I would prefer to have in fantasy basketball for the rest of the season, probably for future seasons as well. Just because George, I don't know exactly how old he is, but he's got more. I think he's got more years behind him than ahead of him. And Sengun is someone who's going to be an absolute stud for years to come. So Sengun for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is pretty interesting that their 9 cap values end up being kind of comparable, which is just kind of shows why 9 cap value doesn't always tell the full story. But I'd be surprised if anybody wanted Paul George over Sengun. he's done so much for Houston. Paul George has been pretty terrible for the Sixers. I think, like, apart from Embiid just not being available, Paul George being as bad as he has been in his first season in Philadelphia has been a big reason that they're where they are in the standings. So, I mean, for Dan's sake, I hope that he turns it around, but I'm not confident that that happens. So yeah, I'd much rather have Sengun.
Yeah, I'm not even going to talk about the Sixers.
So hey, we got to talk about the Sixers. We got to talk about your Sixers.
Eagles are in the NFC Championship game. That's all I know. All
right, man.
But yeah, I mean, I think Paul George, my frustration with him is just like the efficiency is not there, and he's not getting treated like the money that he's making. And so, especially with Joel Embiid probably going to be out, I mean, who knows where this is going to go, but it doesn't seem like it's going the right direction. So I think there is a glimmer that maybe Paul George actually, can maintain 4th round-ish value. But as you said, I think that the rankings, the weightings are definitely telling a different story than what's actually happening. And I'd much rather have Alperen Sengun in that scenario. This one I think is pretty interesting because CJ McCollum has been playing crazy good basketball lately. Like these 45, he dropped 45 on MLK Day. I mean, really just willed the Pelicans back in that victory. But Jaylen Brown's been kind of inconsistent this year, like hasn't been super impressive. So Raph, like which one would you rather have? I'd still probably take Jaylen Brown, but I see the argument for CJ.
Yeah, CJ's been really good recently. New Orleans hasn't gone into tank mode, but his name has come up in trade rumors, so you kind of have to factor that in as well. If he were to be moved, where would he go and what would his role look like? Jaylen's role is pretty secure up in Boston. I think that would be my reason for taking him. Even with like the free throw percentage, you're pretty much punting that category with him, I think. So, and you expect to do that with a big, not so much with a wing, but it is what it is. So I think I would take Jaylen Brown, but it's a very close one. Unlike the other two that I suggested for this conversation, but I think this one's going to be a closer. I'll take JB, but it's not by much.
For the sake of it not being a clean sweep across the board for all of them, I'll argue CJ McCollum. I did have Jaylen Brown originally, but I think looking at it more, I do have a case for CJ McCollum. Okay. As we discussed yesterday, Raph, the Pelicans are the hottest team in the West. They've won 4 games in a row.
Yeah. Fortune, man. It's crazy.
They're currently 10 games out of the postseason. They have a couple weeks before the trade deadline to kind of decide what they're going to do. Let's say that they win a handful more games, not like just continue this winning streak, but only drop a couple games, and they go into the trade deadline and they're like 6 games out of the postseason. And Brandon Ingram could potentially still come back, and Herb Jones will eventually come back. Like, do they say, hey, like, let's just make a push for this thing? Like, Minnesota's look pretty bad. The Suns have looked pretty bad. The Warriors have been inconsistent. And then the other teams in front of them right now are the Spurs and Trailblazers, which I don't think they should have any issues passing as long as they're able to stay healthy, which is obviously a big question mark in New Orleans. So if they make a push for it, CJ McCollum is going to be at the center of that with the amount of injuries they have. Or they trade him at the trade deadline and he lands with a contender where he's probably more like a 6-man role, playing 25, 28 minutes per game and getting to shoot whenever he wants. That's my case for CJ McCollum. I do think Jaylen Brown is definitely the safer option, but I think McCollum's recent run and plus the opportunity of what he could potentially do, whether he's in New Orleans or not, is very intriguing.
Yeah, Boston finally sweating a little bit. I'm sure they're fine. They're playing really well.
Mazzulla loves it.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, can we get a little adversity here? I need something to like get these guys like hyped about. Yeah, Joe Mazzulla is still like the best interviewer, man. Like that guy just has gems. Seems like the most awkward dude would seem to be like one of the best coaches, man. So interesting. But he was a player once, so I guess he relates. But now that'll do it for Week 13 Rotoworld Basketball Show. We'll see you next week. Probably even more to talk about, and definitely, hopefully, see some big names traded over the weekend. For Raphielle Johnson, Noah Rubin, and Dan Titus. See you next time. Peace.